Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about technology and its effect in the long run. In Lecture 1 to Lecture 3, we focus on the short-run business cycle around the trend, and today's lecture focuses on the trend itself. Because technological progress is the driving force of the economic growth in the long run. The previous 3 lectures focused on the short-run fluctuations of the 3 macroeconomic indicators of macroeconomy, that is GDP, unemployment, and inflation. The fluctuations of the 3 indicators are driven by high-frequency factors such as productivity shock on the supply side, demand shock, and policy shocks. These shocks usually happen every year, every quarter, and even every month. That is why we call economic fluctuations as a short-run problem, because the effects of the high-frequency factors will die away in the short run. However, in the long run, GDP, unemployment, and inflation will all converge to its long-run trend, and the trend is only driven by low-frequency factors, such as technological progress, institutional improvement, and cultural evolution. These low-frequency factors only occur once in the decade, century, or even millennium. So in macroeconomics, we have 2 fundamental issues to be addressed. One is the short-run business cycle, which we covered in the first 3 lectures. And the other is long-run economic growth, which we are going to cover today. Note that there is a difference between economic growth and economic development, because economic growth only talks about the growth in GDP, while economic development also discusses inequality, education, and structural transformation. We will sharpen our focus on economic growth only in this module. Once again, let me show you the big picture at the module level to make sure you understand where you are standing at. We have just finished the short-run business cycle topic and now move to the long-run growth in Unit 16. But the economy is a system. Although there is a special focus in each unit, we still use the whole system to analyze the topic. So you will still expect to see a household, a firm, in output market and input markets, and you will also have governments and the rest of the world to affect the decision-making of the individuals in the economy. Specifically, for this lecture, we are going to apply this generic framework to analyze the effect of the long-run technological progress. The flowchart on this slide shows you the big picture of this lecture. To begin with, we know that the output, or GDP, is produced by 2 fundamental inputs. The first one is labor, the second one is capital. And the 2 inputs are combined by a certain level of technology in the economy. So the technological progress can improve the efficiency of production to produce output by these 2 inputs. Economic history told us technological progress is a double-bladed sword. New technology can create some new vacancies through job creation, but at the same time, it can also destroy some existing jobs and cause unemployment. There is a well-documented relationship between unemployment and vacancy, which is called Beverage Curve. In addition to the effect of technological progress on the labor market, it also causes changes of investment in the capital market. The government can also play a role in technological progress, and the rest of the world, as well as the other conditions of the economy, can exacerbate or mitigate the effects of technological progress. You may have already noticed that in the long run, only the supply side matters. So all the analysis in this lecture only focus on the supply side factors, such as technological progress and institutions. So the first half of this lecture focuses on the technological progress and its effect on the input and output markets. So the second part of this lecture focuses on another long-run factor, that is, institutions and policies. First, let's look at some historical facts of technological progress. The adoption and dissemination of new technology was never easy in history. As early as 1412, the use of a new spinning wheel was prohibited because people think that this new technology posed a threat to the existing job opportunities. Similar things happened in Europe in 16th century when new ribbon weaving machines are banned for the same reason. And in 1811 in the UK, the famous Luddite movement against spinning machine repeated the history of new technology resistance. Even in 1984 in India, there was an anti-computerization by labor unions for exactly the same reason 500 years ago. The only difference is that they are resisting different technology. And not very long time ago, in 2016 in London, there was an anti-Uber movement by taxi drivers because they thought this new app may reduce their customers. Every single day in the UK, a job is destroyed and another one is created every 14 seconds. And at least 10% of jobs are destroyed every year. These interesting facts about technological progress in history and in nowadays raise a question. Is technological progress a good thing or better? If it is good, good for whom? And if it is bad, bad for whom? To answer this question, we need to describe how technological progress affects the economy, especially the supply side of the economy, because we are talking about the long run. This is a consensus in economics that if you are talking about the long-run changes, then the supply side is more relevant. This is a classical tradition. By contrast, in the short run, the demand side factors are more relevant, and this is a Keynesian tradition. The classical and Keynesian traditions are the two most prevailing school of thoughts in macroeconomics. We will start with one of the two input markets on the supply side, the capital market. Technological progress cannot exist without capital accumulation and investment, because all the innovative activities that brings about the technological progress needs input of money and people. The details of the link between innovation, capital accumulation, and technological progress is discussed in Unit 21. Today, we focus on the other direction of the causality. That is, the technological progress can also bring in capital accumulation. For example, entrepreneurial activities inspired by new technology can result in new business opportunities and innovation rents or profits. To empirically verify the effect of technological progress on the capital accumulation, let's look at the data. The horizontal axis is the capital per worker, and the vertical axis is the GDP per worker. If we plot all the countries on these coordinates, we can see a clear diminishing return of capital on GDP. It suggests that if you have a higher capital per worker for a country, then the GDP per worker tends to be higher, but this return tends to diminish over time. So if you have too much capital per worker already, then the additional benefits of accumulating more capital is less and less. In other words, capital accumulation on its own cannot generate sustainable growth because of the diminishing marginal product of capital. To achieve sustainable economic growth, technological progress is needed to lift the production function up, which leads to a higher capital intensity as well as output per worker over time. To see this, we will use the diagram of production function and some maths. A standard production function can be written in this way. Y is the aggregate output, and F is the production function's name. It has two inputs. The first is N, the labor input, and the other is K, the capital input. If we divide both-hand sides of the production function at the aggregate level, then the left-hand side becomes Y divided by N, which is actually the output per worker, or labor productivity. The right-hand side can usually be rewritten into a function of K over N, which is actually the capital intensity, or capital per worker. We can draw the relationship between Y over N and K over N in this diagram. The concave curve is actually the per worker version of production function. The average productive capital APK is defined as the aggregate output Y over the aggregate capital K, which is actually the slope of the line through the origin and any points on the production function. For example, point A corresponds to a K over N equals to 20 and Y over N equals to 15. The APK of point A is the slope of OA, which is equal to 15 divided by 20. The marginal productive capital MPK, in contrast, is the slope of the tangent line of a point on the production function. Still take point A as example. The MPK of point A is the ratio between the change in Y over N when there is an additional change in K over N. It is called marginal productive capital because the extra change in the output per worker, or Y over N, is induced by the marginal change in capital per worker, or K over N. Almost all production functions in modern economics has a feature of diminishing marginal productive capital, which means the curve is concave in mathematics term, which means the slope of the tangent line on different points became flatter as K over N increases. Technological progress can shift the production function from a lower position to a higher position because for any given level of capital per worker, a greater level of output per worker can be produced because you are more efficient after the technological progress. So instead of going from A to B, the growth path usually goes from A to B prime. So the economic growth path is a combination of accumulation of capital and progress of technology. This theory is verified by the data over time in the diagram of this slide. Take the UK as the example. The growth path of the UK from 1760 to 1990 is better described by a line rather than a concave curve. Similar patterns are found for the US, Taiwan, and Japan, but different countries have different slopes and speed of growth. Now let's turn to the second input market, the labor market. As we mentioned in the big picture of this lecture, technological progress will lead to creative destruction in the labor market. It is creative because it creates more jobs, but it is also destructive because it will destroy old jobs. So the net effect of technological progress on the labor market depends on which effect dominates. So it is quite important to predict the direction of technological progress because it is relevant to your career choice in the future. This is a diagram to show you the future prospects of different professions in terms of two dimensions of the job. The horizontal axis indicates how much math skills are required for a job, and the vertical axis states that how much social skills are required for the job. Every job can find its position on this diagram. For example, financial managers requires a high math skill and a high social skill. So it is towards the northeast of this diagram. And the laborers requires almost no math skills and no social skills. So it is towards the southwest. The color of each dot indicates whether or not this job is promising in the future. If it is red, then this job is very likely to be replaced by a computer in the future. If it is green, then it is less likely to be replaced by a computer and it has a very promising future. And if it is gray, then there's no change of this job in the future. As you can see right away, those jobs with very high required social skills and math skills are trending in the future, while jobs with low required social skills are declining. It is because people are very sophisticated and complicated. It is very unlikely for computers to develop social skills in the short run. I think this is a very good chart for you to decide which profession you're going to pursue in your future. This slide shows you the cross-country evidence of how technological progress creates and destroys jobs in different countries. Red bars are jobs destroyed, and blue bars are jobs created, and gray bars indicates the net effect on the employment. In the UK, unfortunately, the net effect of technological progress between 80s and 98 is negative. That means more old jobs are destroyed than new jobs created. This slide shows the overtime evidence of creative destruction in the labor market. We can see that job creation tends to be negatively correlated with job destruction over the business cycles. When there's a recession, for example, this two shaded area, job destructions are higher and job creations are lower. So job creation is strongly pro-cyclical, while job destruction is counter-cyclical. But there is a secular trend in the long run that both job creation and job destruction are declining because the technological progress is slowing down over time. The Beverage Curve is the negative relationship between vacancy rate and unemployment rate. Vacancy rate is defined as the proportion of jobs looking for workers, while unemployment rate is defined as the proportion of workers looking for jobs. For the US, the relationship is more negative or steeper, but for Germany, the slope is flatter. The existence of the Beverage Curve raises a very interesting question. Why are there vacant jobs that are not filled, while many unemployed people are still looking for jobs at the same time? How can unemployment and vacancy coexist? It is like you're so hungry and hunting for food everywhere, but there is a piece of cake just in front of you, and you ignore it. This phenomenon is explained by the search and matching model, or the so-called Diamond, Mortensen, and Pissarides model, because this model is invented by these three economists. The coexistence of unemployment and vacancy is basically due to three mismatches. The first one is skills mismatch. For example, the job vacancy requires an IT programmer, but the unemployed person only knows how to wash dishes. It's like your girlfriend wants you to cook for her, but you want her to cook for you. This skills mismatch can make the vacant job vacant and unemployed people unemployed. The second is space mismatch. Job seekers and vacancies may be located in different parts of the country or even different countries of the world. It's like your true love is in Zimbabwe, but you are in the UK, and we all know that distance relationship doesn't work. The last case is information mismatch. It is quite difficult to find the true love, as you know. There are 8 billion people in the world, how do you know who is your true love? It's the same in the labor market. The job seekers and the employers may not know each other. So that is why we need agencies to find the right person for each job and for each position. And if you can't find your true love, it is better off to be single. So that is why we have vacancies and unemployment at the same time. The ICT technological progress greatly improved the matching efficiency. We can all use LinkedIn and the internet to do interviews and search for jobs all over the world. But obviously, finding your true love is much more difficult than finding a right job. In summary, technological progress drives the long-run economic growth in output via the two input market, the capital market and the labor market. Technological progress can also directly affect the output market in the long run. In particular, the number of firms operating can change due to entry and exit. Firm exit happens due to low markups. The owners of the firm may withdraw their funds or even close firms if the existing profit is too low compared to alternative opportunities. And on the other hand, firm entry also happens due to high markup. Firm exit and firm entry happens when there is a new technology invented out there and it changes the profitability of the current business. Let's use a model to explain how the markup is determined. On the graph to the right of this slide, the horizontal axis is the number of firms in this industry, and the vertical axis is the markup or the profitability of this industry. It is straightforward to see that the profit maximizing markup line, the blue line, is downward sloping because a greater number of firms in this industry will drive down the profitability of this industry. On the other hand, the equilibrium markup line, the red line, shows the markup mu star that is just sufficient to retain the existing number of firms. The equilibrium markup lines describes the opportunity cost of setting up the business in this industry. If the equilibrium markup line is too low, then firms start to leave this industry. So the intersection between the blue line and the red line gives you the long-run equilibrium number of firms. If there are more firms than the long-run equilibrium, then firms start to leave this industry. And if there are less firms than this long-run equilibrium, then there will be more firms to enter this industry because this extra profit opportunity is appealing to entrepreneurs. This slide shows the effects of technological progress on the equilibrium number of firms in the output market. Let's assume there is a new technology invented, which lowers the acceptable markup or profit in this industry from a higher level to a lower level. So the new equilibrium number of firms increases from 210 to 250. Obviously, there is a growth in the size of the cake produced by this industry. The distribution of this cake is split between the firm and the worker. The share of this cake obtained by the firm is equal to the profit, and the profit is equal to the markup ratio mu multiplied by the productivity of labor lambda. On the other hand, the workers get a share of 1 minus mu multiplied by lambda, and it is equal to wage, W. So it is straightforward to see that when mu goes down, wage goes up, and the price setting curve in the labor market shifts upwards. To summarize, new technology will shift up the price setting curve and the labor productivity lambda. But there is a dynamic adjustment process. The first stage is a change from the original equilibrium A to point D. In this stage, existing jobs are destroyed by the new technology. But the new technology also creates new business opportunities and high profits. This encourages new entry. That is a change from point D to point E. Point E corresponds to a low unemployment level, which leads to a higher real wage, thanks to a higher bargaining power of the worker, which will lift the price-setting curve up to a new equilibrium level, B. This is the third stage. It can take a long time to adjust from point A to point B because of two gaps. The first gap is the adjustment gap. This is the time taken from the outside change in the technology progress to the inside change of the firm. It usually takes time to internalize the new knowledge into your body, and it is the same for an institution or a firm. The other gap is called diffusion gap. It takes a long time for new technology to be fully disseminated across the whole economy. Up to now, we have been focused on technological progress. Now let's turn to another long-term factor, the institutions and policies. Let's look at some cross-sectional evidence. The following graph shows you a scatter plot of the unemployment on the horizontal axis and real wage growth on the vertical axis. We don't like unemployment, but we like wage growth. So a good economy should have a high wage growth with a low unemployment rate, while a bad economy have low wage growth but high unemployment. So we can divide the region into three segments. The high performers are towards the north, and the low performers are towards the south, and there is a middle average performance. As you can see, the UK is one of those average performers. But we do want to know and learn from those high performers like Norway and Japan, and avoid being US, Canada, Italy, and Spain. Economists find that there are two reasons for the cross-sectional differences among these countries. The first is the institutional arrangement of trade unions. For example, inclusive trade unions choose not to exercise maximum bargaining power because wage increases will affect job creation in the long run. So these kind of trade unions can have a good trade-off between the higher wage and higher unemployment. The second is policy. A well-designed unemployment insurance scheme and job placement service can achieve low unemployment rate. For example, if the unemployment benefit is too high, then there is no motivation for the unemployed people to find jobs, which will prolong the unemployment duration for the unemployed. There are some case studies of the good performers and bad performers on the chart in the previous slides, such as Norway, Japan, and Spain. They both have different institutions and policies in the labor market. This chart shows the overtime evidence for the unemployment rate for different countries. Specifically, the UK always have a higher unemployment rate compared to Netherlands, especially after the 1980s, when Madam Thatcher significantly reduced the power of the unions, which contributed to the institutional difference between the UK and the Netherlands. This is another graph to show you some overtime evidence in terms of the performance of wage growth and unemployment rate. Most countries underwent deteriorations of their position in this diagram. One exception is the US, which has a higher wage growth but lower unemployment rate over time. The different experience of the UK and Netherlands can be attributed to different institutions and policies. In the Netherlands, institutions become more inclusive, moving in the Nordic direction by common agreement. The Wassenaar Accord, published in 1982, required unions to offer wage restraint, while firms agreed to reduction in working hours. This accord built a rapport relationship between unions and firms, and so the unemployment rate tends to be low in Nordic countries like Netherlands. However, in the UK, policies since the 1980s by Madam Thatcher reduced the power of the non-inclusive unions and increased the competition in labour market. It significantly weakened the non-inclusive unions to organize strike actions in the UK. This contributed to a higher unemployment rate in the UK compared to the European counterparts. As we have seen in the previous slide, the US is an exception and experienced an improvement in the chart. This is mainly because of the shifting up of the profit curve of the US in the 1990s. Following a series of ICT technological progress, lower corporation tax, and weaker union. As a summary, you can ask yourself the following questions on the summary slide, and please read Unit 16 of the core textbook for more details of the lecture, with the big picture of the lecture as your navigation. Have fun!